Hello everybody and welcome to this discussion about VAT on fees. For the next hour we'll be talking everything VAT on fees. I'll be leading the discussion. My name's Sarah Kinane, I'm the Head of Media and Communications at the Independent Schools Council. Delighted to be joined here at LVS Ascot by my boss, Julie Robinson, the CEO of the Independent Schools Council, and Christine Cunniff, who is the Principal here at LVS Ascot. Hello both.
Hello, thank you very much.
Afternoon.
We'll also be talking to a variety of other heads up and down the country who will be joining us via the magic of the interwebs. As you might be able to tell by us and some of the other names on the chat, we are not pretending to be an impartial discussion group. We are here to talk about VAT and fees from the point of view of independent schools, the concerns we have, and what schools are doing about it at the moment. We've had questions in already, but if you'd like to put in your questions, type them in the chat, or you can send them to press@isc.co.uk. We'll be monitoring that throughout the chat. So I did say we're not impartial and we're not partisan, but I think it's only fair to start by talking about some of the issues that have come out of VAT on fees, particularly some of the arguments that are being used to justify this policy, because I think it'd be good to talk about those and to hear your responses in particular. So Julie, it's argued that this policy is aimed at improving things for the 93% rather than protecting the privilege of the 7%. That's fair enough, isn't it?
No, I don't think this policy actually will benefit all children, which is, we all want to see all children having a great education. And actually, I think the effect of this policy will be to damage part of independent education, displace children into state education, and actually overall then put more pressure on an already stretched state sector.
And is that a view you share, I assume, Christine?
Absolutely. I was raised in the state sector, educated all the way through. I taught in the state sector for 10 years before coming into independent education. I've lots of friends and peers within the state group. We're all in it together at the end of the day, and what I think everyone wants to see throughout the UK is good education for all children. And we want any kind of policy that would provide this. This policy, I don't think, will provide that.
And Labour have described this as ending the tax breaks that private schools enjoy. Would you describe it as a tax break?
No, I certainly wouldn't describe it as a tax break. In fact, this is an additional tax. So this is specifically targeted at parents who pay independent school fees, and that's a tax that is not required across the world. Also, independent schools already pay tax, they pay VAT, they just can't reclaim it, and as a whole, independent schools pay over £5 billion a year in tax. So this is a very specific additional tax we're dealing with here.
Another argument that gets used quite often is that school fees have gone up year on year, and I don't think anyone would be disputing that. And we've not seen a big change in demand, and in fact demand has increased year on year. So why is this different?
It's true, independent school fees have gone up. They've gone up owing to inflationary costs, and they've gone up on average about 5% year on year over the last 10 years. That's very different, that sort of gradual increase, very, very different from a sudden double-digit increase and the effect that would have on affordability.
I think just leading on to what you were saying about the tax as well just a moment ago, is that it is actually a tax saving, the fact that children are in independent schools. And I know a lot of my parents are very upset that they have already paid that tax and now they're being asked to do it again. And it is going to have a significant impact on the ability of parents to send their children to private education.
I mean, it's been argued that this is a tax that doesn't need to be passed on to parents, that schools can cut their cloth. Is that the case? Would that be the case for you, Christine?
Well, I think with all of us, in every school, the biggest cost that we have is the cost of the staff that we employ, the teachers, and we can't reclaim the tax back on that. And that's a huge cost, and the salaries have gone up quite significantly over the last couple of years, as we know, and rightly so, because good academic staff need to be paid the right amount to bring them into our profession in a backdrop where we have a recruitment crisis in the UK. So there is that cost is never going to go away. So I can't see how that could be cut, but somewhere along the line, if this is implemented and we have to make cuts, every school in this country will have to see where we can make them. It's not as easy as that, because a lot of schools are right on the breadline anyway.
And this is a tax that will become legally, schools will have to add 20% to the fees bill. So to get that overall bill down for parents would mean cutting the price of the fee, the sticker price of fee by 20%. That's a fifth. And I don't think it's realistic to expect schools to be able to encapsulate that amount of saving.
Not all parties are advocating for this tax, and I think it is worth saying, as we always do, that we're advocating against a policy, not a particular party. We want to work with all politicians on improving education for all children. And another party who's spoken out about VAT is the Liberal Democrats. Now, they've said that they oppose taxing education on principle, and that as a result they don't agree with VAT on fees. They have said, however, that they think independent schools should do more to earn their charitable benefits. Do you think that's a fair point, Julie?
Yeah, I know schools are really keen to demonstrate their civic duty and to be part of community work. They're very much connected with their local communities. There's so much amazing partnership work going on, means-tested bursaries. Schools are doing lots and lots of public benefit, and I know we want to do more and more, and we're really keen to work with policymakers to make that happen.
Yeah, I think, as you say, working with people, with the policymakers is really important. And, like with any other business that are affected by any kind of tax change, engage with the sector, because together I'm sure we could be great for every child.
And it's interesting that you talk about business there, because obviously one of the other arguments is that independent schools are run as businesses, therefore shouldn't they be subject to the same taxes as businesses too?
Well, I think we would probably be one of the only countries in the world that actually would tax education, and I think it's wrong to tax education. Education is a right for every child, no matter what that looks like. There's a number of different settings, and different schools are right for different children and for different needs. And to tax education is fundamentally and morally and ethically wrong.
And you were talking before we went on air about the fact that this is about choice. It's about parental choice and having that diversity within the education ecosystem.
Absolutely. All our schools are so different. I think, when I talk to my peers, and a number of them are going to be speaking today, we are all different, and we provide a different setting for different children and their different needs. And we'll hear that, especially for children with SEND today, and from the music and performing arts backgrounds as well. There's got to be something for everyone up there. And I think we're in a democratic society where I'm a parent of 3 children. I would like to think I had a choice where I'd like to send my children to school.
And can you talk a bit, Christine, we sort of spoke about things like tax and the fact that schools pay it already. But in terms of benefit, economic benefit to a local community, I mean, your school's benefit goes far beyond its school gates, doesn't it?
100%. I mean, we're in a small town, quite a famous town really, and we tried to use local businesses as well. And a lot of local businesses have actually approached us and said, well, if you cut back here and do this, what about maybe florists or stationery or photographers and things like that? Those things will have to go. And that's going to have an impact on the local community. And okay, we're in a lovely area in Ascot where there's quite a large population, but I really do feel for schools, especially in out of the home counties, and I know we've got a few here today who will absolutely feel that much, much more. And that's a big impact.
One of the things that has been put forward as an idea to help those schools that are struggling is the idea that independent schools could become state academies. It's an idea that was most recently put forward in the Sunday Times. Do you think this is a good way forward for schools that might otherwise close?
Well, I think there's a number of considerations here, and I think some of us will remember what happened back in 2010 when this idea came about as well. And I think there were 103 independent schools that applied for a free school status, and only 6 out of those 103 actually passed the stress test. That you have to have certain criteria to be able to do that, and one is that you've got to be in a financially viable position to be able to go and become an academy or state school and not put cost onto the government, because this ultimately would cost the government money. And what happened to those other 97 schools that didn't pass that test? Not all of them have been successful as well. So I know there's one very, very successful one that we heard about in Liverpool. It was in the Times article, but there are others that it did not work. So it's not an ideal solution. It's not as easy as that.
And this policy is designed to be a revenue raiser. Presumably, Julie, if those schools went back into the state system, there would be no revenue to be had.
Yeah, the amount of funding that this policy is likely to raise is very much under dispute. Will it raise anything? Will it in fact in the end cost the state? So yes, if independent schools switch to state-maintained status, if they become some form of state academy, then that's going to increase costs to the taxpayer.
And we were talking about parents and the choices that they would like to have. So I think it'd be good to bring in Lavina Tandon from Education Not Taxation. Hello, Lavina.
Hello.
Hello. Can you tell us a little bit about what the current mood is among parents? How worried are they?
Sleepless nights, anxious because we do not know what to tell our children or to tell the children, where are they going to be ending up in September and moving them from where they are. Ignored because no one has spoken to us, listened to us, even bothered to find out what is our side of stories. Do we own helipads, or we are not even owning any homes? And desperate because this complete uncertainty, and there seems to be no plan at all. So a lot of the parents, including me, and this is one term that keeps recurring: sleepless nights. We do not know what to do because we don't see a plan.
And why do parents choose independent education? Why did you choose independent education for your children?
For various different reasons. Now, I chose for my children because it spoke to my heritage. It is a mainstream kind of school which has people from all over, but it also does certain things which speaks to where I come from, which is India. But people or parents choose for various different reasons. We have 170,000 signatures and counting on Education Not Taxation. Absolutely an apt title. I hope people would look at that. And it is because some of them have special needs. I have a mother whose child is slowly losing her hearing, and she was almost suicidal in the mainstream school. She couldn't get that kind of support, which she then had to find in a private school. Or there are bright children. One of the child, and I'm giving you examples so that you see these are real people, just not numbers, who is so bright. He went Nigerian origin, went to his mother, one of 4, and said, I want to go and learn Japanese. And he found, and now he's in a school, and he is working in McDonald's to be able to support. Now, there could be families working in militaries, and they're constantly moving, some support from the government, but they're looking after the security of the country, us, so that we could sleep, but they are having sleepless nights because they definitely would not be able to support. Then there are other schools that speak to faith, or they're performing arts schools. So various people send their children to the state school for various different reasons. But these people are just, and yes, I have to add, few of the parents, and many, I did not know this, have to send their children because they couldn't find a space in the state sector. One of the mother, I couldn't believe my ears when I heard that she absolutely did not think she wanted to go to private school. That was not an option. And she was walking back dejected one day because she was on a waiting list, which was going beyond 6 months. And so she said, oh, homeschooling, but she had another child, which was who was a special needs child. And then she spotted an advertisement of a private school, which was close by. And that's how she sent the child to the school. They don't own a house, because they can't own a house. They're using all their savings possibly. So, the scenarios are so different. And that's why we urge, can someone please come and speak to us and see that, yes, we are 7%, but for any government, any country, any politician is judged by how they look after their minorities. So please, we are 7%, but we matter. Can you please make us matter and listen to us?
And thank you so much, Lavina. And that was actually quite a good overview of all of the other things we'll be talking about, all the other areas we'll be talking about. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
I just want to bring in one of our heads as well, Silas Edmonds, who's the head at Ewell Castle. Hello, Silas.
Hi, how you doing?
Hi. Can you tell us a bit about what the mood is like among your parents, and a little bit about what your parent body looks like?
So the mood is quite sombre at Ewell Castle at the moment. We have roughly a 15% reduction in our Year 7 numbers in September, which we haven't seen that for a very long time. And parents are withdrawing even after they've accepted places at the last minute. It's all anxiety over VAT on school fees. I think there will be a slight delay. So for those children who are currently midway through GCSE or midway through A-level and BTEC, those families will pull out all the stops. They'll borrow money from grandparents, aunties and uncles, etc., to get them through. But in a year's time, they've got some big decisions to make. We do not have super rich families at our school. Our fees are relatively modest and affordable within the sector. And parents make big sacrifices. I often make jokes with some of them about how it's another camping holiday this year, or not a holiday at all, and they're scrimping and saving to afford the fees. We have a number of children who are on means tested bursaries, scholarship awards, just to make it a little bit more manageable. And then we also support a number of 100% bursary awards, particularly for refugee children, and also children from backgrounds where they deserve the opportunity to be more socially mobile and have what they need. So I would echo exactly what Lavina was saying, that our parents feel disempowered, they feel not listened to. And I've had a number of parents, either on the phone or in my study with me, in tears over this situation, because their children are all geared up and ready to start at Ewell Castle, only to have the rug pulled from under them, because as one parent said to me, it's either the mortgage or the school fees.
And Christine, does that reflect what you're seeing at LVS Ascot as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously the parent group was started by one of our parents who's currently in Year 6, and I know he's watching at the moment, and I know we won't mind saying that I know he has had sleepless nights. In fact, he was up working on a project one night. When I opened my phone at 6 o'clock, I think he'd been up all night working, because he said, I can't sleep. And and he's having to think about the future for his child as well, who's got special needs. And I think there's a lot of people who are sitting on it and probably not sharing their angst that they're feeling at the moment. And I just think, in the world that we've got at the moment, there's so much to worry about. It's not right that parents are feeling this anxiety, this psychological impact this must be having on children and adults. I think is unforgivable.
If we turn to Emma Verrier now, who is the CEO of the Welsh Independent Schools Council, because I think it's a very interesting case study. Emma, could you tell us a bit about the independent sector from Wales, and how does it differ from what people might expect?
Hello everybody. Yes, of course, Sarah. So the independent school sector in Wales is a very small sector compared to the rest of the UK. It makes up about 3%. And there are no academies, state or otherwise, in Wales. It's very diverse. It's made up of equal numbers of mainstream and special schools, and includes faith schools as well. Our special schools house some of the most vulnerable, poorest learners in Wales, and lots of those children are without EHCPs. So it's very different to the rest of the UK. Most are smaller schools, they operate on tight margins. And like Eamon and Lavina said, you know, parents are very concerned about their futures, as are heads. Big wealthy schools are not the norm in Wales. One school has closed since I undertook an impact assessment report in 2023, and 2 schools are already closing at the end of this academic year. So whilst education in Wales is devolved, VAT is not. So this will have a significant impact on Welsh schools and a likely disproportionate impact compared to the rest of the UK. It will also cause problems for the Welsh economy and rural communities. Our schools in Wales are demographically spread out, often in rural towns. Our parents work hard, as Lavina said, and make sacrifices to send their children to an independent school setting. Many children of our schools have moved from the state sector due to additional learning needs or SEN, or they've been bullied in the state sector, or they excel academically or talented in sport and music, and the state sector is simply not meeting their needs. Or there is no alternative in the local state education sector.
You mentioned there about the impact assessment report that you did that I think you sent to the Welsh Government. Could you tell us a bit more about what that impact assessment said about the potential impact of VAT on the Welsh education system?
Yes, so in 2023, I conducted an impact assessment of our members. The Welsh Independent Schools Council acts for 76 out of 80 schools, but when I collected or started to collect the data in 2022, at that time we acted for 69 schools. So the survey looked at the local and wider economic impact and their operational health, and showed that VAT on fees will have a significant impact. As I've already said, schools operate on tight margins, and we did 3 scenarios, and in the worst case scenario, 19 schools could close and more than 6,500 pupils could move from the independent schools in Wales to the state sector, leaving an 80 million funding gap in Welsh Government finances, and therefore putting more pressure on an already tightly squeezed state sector. Now, I said that data was collected end of 2022. As Eamon said, parents are already looking at whether to send their children. And I have recently been collecting data, although it's not conclusive yet, but it's clear from the data I have collected that this is having a catastrophic effect on our schools for September. Numbers are down in year 7, boarding school numbers are down, and year 11 A-level student numbers are down. Lots of parents are not making a decision about September yet because they're going to see what the future holds on election day, and heads, parents, teachers and pupils are very, very worried about it. And as you say, it's sleepless nights. So going back to the report that I did, it shows that our schools in Wales are more vulnerable to closure, even if they lose a small number of pupils, and they simply won't be able to afford the tax or absorb it. You know, WISC supports a successful high-quality state school system, but the report shows that VAT will be a hindrance, not a means of supporting them, as children will be displaced into the state sector, and it's already going to happen with a decrease in numbers for September.
And you said there that 19 schools could close. What do those schools mean to their local communities? What do the Welsh Independent Schools mean to their local communities?
As I said earlier, you know, many of our schools are small independent schools, often in rural areas, and often the biggest or the second biggest employer in that town, and frequently the only local independent school in that area. So this means that almost all the children who leave our schools due to the changes will need to make use of a state-funded space immediately. those schools in those rural areas make significant contributions to rural economies and communities. If that school closed, it will have a detrimental effect on the local community, their supply chain, businesses, and jobs will be lost.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Emma, for laying out the situation in Wales. It's obviously it's a very interesting it's a very interesting place, Wales, just in general, but in terms of independent schools. But the idea of that independent school at the heart of its community, of an unusual parent body, I think isn't necessarily unique to Wales. And if we just turn over to Nicholas Petrick over in Stafford Grammar, Nick, can you tell us a bit about your local demographic? It's a bit different to what people might expect, isn't it?
Yes, good afternoon. Stafford's it's an interesting town. There's a real range of people who live here. So we have some who are very affluent, and as people have said, I'm sure that in some cases their families will be able to grudgingly pay the VAT, albeit that I don't think anybody really feels it's a fair tax on them. But there are so many for whom it is going to be a challenge that takes them, it's just a step too far. They will not be able to afford it, and sadly, they, at the very last moment, will be looking to find places in other schools for their children. We do have parents who are working 2 jobs each. They may be working in the local pub as a way to be able to make up some of the differences, or as cleaners in the hospitals. So there really aren't, it's that perception that everybody, again, as we've talked about, can just absorb this VAT or find the extra money to be able to pay these fees. It's just not true.
How does the parent body differ outside of the more typical sort of what people imagine when they imagine independent schools? Because it's not necessarily all hugely wealthy parents, is it?
No, not at all. The school, interestingly, is not a very old school. We started just in 1982 with 18 pupils, and now you can actually see a photograph in the background. We have over 400 pupils, and that is a reflection of the fact that within this community there was just that feeling that they needed to have a school which would be able to provide for them in a way that they needed, and that wasn't being provided for them in the other schools that they could go to. And there are some good schools around us. Please don't for one moment think I would ever suggest that the state sector aren't doing a wonderful job. They are, but it isn't what our parents were looking for. And so they set up the school that I'm in here now, and subsequently, it's been a real effort actually over that sort of 40-odd year period of parents scrimping and saving to set up the school, to invest in their children's future. And as I say, some of them really are coming from low net worth family incomes. Others are doing better, but Staffordshire is not a wealthy county. And so when people make a decision to send their children to our school, it is a massive commitment, a massive undertaking on their part, and not one taken lightly. They are very conscious that in order to be able to send their children to be with us, they are going to have to put something else either on hold or to just entirely. And people are very quick to say that actually, everybody makes sacrifices. Of course they do. But they shouldn't be punished for trying to do the right thing for their children. And sadly, that is what it feels as if is happening here.
Thank you very much. And you mentioned there about the idea of community and about equivalent provision not necessarily being available. And I think that actually takes us very nicely onto talking about the idea of faith schools and the roles that they play. Aliyah Azam, who heads up the Al Sadiq and Al Zahra schools, your schools represent the Muslim faith. The fees are lower even in the state school per pupil funding, I believe. Can you tell us how you're able to achieve that?
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you very much. Yes, our schools are subsidized by a charitable institution called the Al Khoy Foundation. So our fees are next year, they'll just be under £7,000 for secondary, and for 4,650 for primary. I'm not the head teacher, but my head teacher has been constantly saying that we're going to have to perhaps close our school. And that's been quite a shock to the system. We are a faith school, and we're and as all faith schools are, you know, we live in a democratic society, and education in a democracy should reflect the worldview of the parents and the communities who use it. So essentially, we are doing God in education. And I think what's particular about our faith school, which is a Shia Muslim school, is essentially it's a community supported school rather than private in the usual way. And people are catered to children from backgrounds that are not necessarily wealthy. The parents who send their children to our school, this would be their major financial commitment next to their mortgage. So this VAT addition is essentially a way of punishing them. I mean, the only hope we have is to try and carve a niche for our schools out of the main body of private schools, and to try and ask for an exemption from the proposed new law that would allow parents who are not wealthy a breathing space, as such a law would, you know, affect the pupils.
What can you tell you?
You know, Islam was taught as a monolithic religion, and the diversity wasn't really acknowledged. But because of the presence of our school, that diversity has made a huge impact nationally and even internationally. You know, we had countries, you know, the extended community in other countries like Bahrain and Kuwait ringing the Al Khoy Foundation, asking them, is it true that, you know, Shia beliefs are on the specification on the Department of Education guidance for all the exam boards? So our school is hugely significant for our community. And, you know, many of the children that come are also children of students who've been to our school. You know, I've been a teacher there for 31 years, and I've been teaching children whose parents used to come here. And I know that this is really going to impact their capability. So it's an extension of their family. You know, it's like a village atmosphere, you know. And we thoroughly believe that, you know, it's like it takes a village to raise a child. It's not just the family, it's the school, it's the whole environment that impacts on the development of God consciousness.
It does sound like if your schools didn't exist, there wouldn't be there wouldn't be other options for parents who wanted an education aligned with their faith.
Oh, that's right. I think parents would sort of opt for homeschooling their children. And they're extremely worried, as your previous guest speakers have mentioned, extremely worried as to how we're already living in a financial crisis. So having to also pay additional costs to the fees is making a huge impact. Normally, students who come to our primary tend to stay on to secondary, but now we're seeing a shift that pupils in our year 6, many of them are now having to opt out and go to the state sector. And I live in the borough of Brent, where the schools are very difficult to get places. So, you know, we are doing a favor to the government, you know, educating children at such a low price. If they were to go into the state sector, it would be much more for them to educate them.
Thank you. And obviously Muslim schools are one area of faith schools, but there are also Jewish schools, Christian schools, and within Christian schools in particular, I think it'd be good to move on to talk about cathedral schools and the choral tradition there. Going back to Nicholas at Stafford Grammar, I believe that that's something you actually have first-hand experience of.
I do. I grew up in Guildford and I went to Royal Grammar School there, but I was also very fortunate to be a chorister at Guildford Cathedral. So very much a formative part of my life was spent good five years singing up at Guildford Cathedral. And the opportunities and the disciplines and routines that I got from being a chorister have stayed with me ever since. I was able to be challenged in my beliefs. I could explore those openly. I could pursue my passions with music. I absolutely loved singing. I had the camaraderie, shall we say, of my peers, and it was a strict routine. It was quite tough. The days were very long. We were singing at 7:40 in the morning, and doing services until 6:30 in the evening, pretty much every day of the week. And so it was quite a disciplined life, but I loved every moment of it. And I felt so very, very privileged to be able to have the opportunity to be a part of a choir like that. And it certainly opened my eyes to choral traditions, to visiting other places that we might do as part of tours, normally in the UK, but sometimes across to France. And it was the most wonderful experience that I would have loved for my own children. I just don't happen to be in a position for them to be in a cathedral school, but I can tell you, hand on heart, it was the best experience growing up as a child to have.
So obviously you have experience of it as a student. We're also joined by Simon Larter Evans, who was the head of a cathedral school. He's now the head of Tring Park School for the Performing Arts. Can you talk, Simon, a bit about the importance of independent schools to music and the arts within the UK? Oh no.
Hopefully he's there.
Hopefully he's there.
Yeah.
I'm here. Ah,
Oh, hello.
my apologies. I can't see myself, but we can edit all that out, can't we?
It's live, Simon, but
Here we go.
there we go. That's the magic of live TV. But yes, if you could talk a bit about those subjects, that'd be grand.
I will, lovely. Just picking up from where Nicholas left off about cathedral schools, a point worth noting is that cathedrals, which fund in the main the choristers that go through sung service many times a week, and that's been going on for over 1,000 years. Cathedrals nowadays in the modern age don't have any funding at all, either from the Church of England. They are entirely independent things, and they have to raise money through tourism very often. And it's the cathedrals who are very close to being on their last legs financially, who are largely funding talented young people that then funnel into the creative arts sector. Choristers generally go on into the arts world in some form, and similarly with other specialist schools like ours. We're one of 8 music and dance scheme schools. We don't yet have any sight of how the music and dance scheme funding, which is a DFE funding model that started back in the 1980s, specifically to support the most talented young people that are likely to go on to feed into the creative industries. So we don't know how that's going to be treated, but there's a codependency in these kinds of schools where fee-paying parents have a tacit understanding that some of their money will then go back out into talent because it works for everybody. The other codependency is on the other side of that talent development funnel, because we then feed the industry. And this is one of the things that I'm finding baffling, is that we've got a Labour policy on the one hand that is super supportive of arts and creative arts and performing development for young people, all of which is a wonderful thing. But once you get into the very specialist end, it's incredibly expensive. The infrastructure alone, we don't have capital grants from the government to look after, in our case, 15 studios. They're very, very expensive businesses to operate. So a 20% imposition, we would have to find a way of absorbing the cost. Our parents are fragile financially in all the ways that we've heard today. So it puts the specialist sector and the choir schools at very, very high risk of being denuded quite significantly. And that then has an impact on the cultural richness of the country.
And could you talk a bit about what you do to bring the arts to as many people as possible within your own school?
Yeah, not just our school, but all of the schools that are within the specialist sector, because we have really fantastic facilities. All of us have some kind of public access, usually at the lowest possible cost of entry. So in our case, about 500 young people come onto site over the weekends and in the evenings, including a dance class for early onset sufferers of Parkinson's. And so that we open up our site to people who want to, what you might call hobbyist performers, to come and try out their craft as actors or singers and dancers. And that's common across all of the specialist groups. Summer schools, Easter residentials. What else do? We have a theatre, not as big as we'd like. We can't afford to buy or build a better one. That's open to the public, so people can come and see the shows that we produce. 16 productions a year in our case.
Thank you very much. And it was good to hear about the music and dance scheme. That is one scheme that is funded by the government so that children can attend independent schools. Another way that the government funds places in independent schools is through the Continuity of Education Allowance, which is used by military families who are being deployed across the UK and overseas. And if I could just bring in Guy Ayling from Mount Kelly School. Can you tell us a bit about why military families choose to use independent schools?
Thank you. Yeah, many military families, service families, get posted. It's as simple as that, and they can sometimes move every 2 years. We've got a family in the diplomatic service here with 2 children in the school, and they have new postings every 2 to 3 years. That can be enormously unsettling for young people. It can be very exciting, I'm sure, but also continuity in education is very, very important. And if you are having to follow your parents on their postings, you may conceivably go to 6, 7 or 8 different schools in the course of an educational journey, and that's not good for anybody. We've talked about psychological impact on children. When children are unsettled and they do not know what is round the corner in terms of change, it can be very degrading for them in all sorts of ways. So military families and diplomatic families use this scheme. They can, of course, seek places in state boarding schools, but there are as many military and diplomatic families who are supported in this way as there are places in the state system. VAT would impact this because even though there are grants effectively that help pay for the fees, the military families do have to pay a minimum, and I don't think those grants, the assistance has kept pace with inflation and fee rises up to this point. So VAT could price some military families out, and I would tackle the stereotype that these are high-ranking army officers in cavalry regiments, perhaps, who can afford to send their children to school and therefore can afford the 20% on what little they might have to pay. They're not. There's lots of soldiers from the ranks and non-commissioned officers who send their children to schools using the CEA because they too also get posted abroad. So it's a very, very inclusive arrangement to support people. I would also say it's been really interesting today, and Lavina gave us a really good articulation of the diversity within the sector. We have military families, we have SEN families, we have faith, we have performing arts, all of these things. And at Mount Kelly, we've got a high performance swimming team, which again is another one of those small constituencies that make up the independent sector. Diversity, of course, is enormously important in an educational landscape, and VAT will harm the diversity within our ecosystem. But if we are to assume that VAT is to come in, and I think personally, philosophically, it's a regressive act, but if it is to come in, I hope that a calm common sense prevails, and a recognition that our sector is full of diversity and groups that need to be protected in the way that Lavina mentioned. True democracies protect minorities. Military families, SEN, faith schools, they're all minorities that deserve to be protected. And I hope I hope that sensitivity and pragmatism and maybe even a dash of humanity prevails.
And I think it is, you mentioned SEND a couple of times there, and Christine, I know there's a lot of SEND provision within LVS. There's been a bit of confusion about what the policy is around VAT and SEND at the moment. So can you shed some light on what you understand the situation to be?
So what I understand at the moment is that if a child has an ECHP, that they may be exempt from the VAT. But that's actually a really small proportion of children that are in our schools. And I know that Michelle might be joining us later, who is actually in a special needs school, who speaks very passionate about this and has actually challenged Keir Starmer on LBC radio. And but in a school like mine, for example, we have 840 pupils on roll. Currently, 230 of those children have some kind of learning need, but we only have one ECHP child within the school. And it's those children that don't meet the threshold, because those ECHP thresholds are very, very high. And I've had parents in the past who have legally challenged the system to try and get one for their child, so I know how difficult it is. And therefore, it's all these children where the parents are not only paying the school fees, they're paying additional SEN charges on top of those school fees as well, to be able to give the children the support that they feel that they need. And it's those children there that will be lost in this, and probably the ones it will impact on the most, and they're the children that will have to move out of the sector. And I know the parents they do sacrifice huge amounts of, we've just heard about people not buying houses and renting houses, etc. And just going on to the forces point as well, is that there is much literature on in-year transfers and the amount of children that, if children have to move around a lot, so for example forces children, and I know some of the children that have come here might have been in 3 or 4 schools before they've reached the age of 10. That's not good for any children, and it's actually proven that it will impact on their educational success and their outcomes, and that boarding schools like ours and in the sector provide that home from home in boarding for children, when rightly so their parents are out doing what they have to do for our country, that we're there supporting them, and we're there for the children with SEN as well.
And Julie, I think that the ISC census has some quite stark figures on that, doesn't it? I think it's 111,000 children receiving SEN support, of whom around 7,600 have an EHCP. So we're talking about over 100,000 children receiving SEN support, whose families, as Christine has just laid out, are really sacrificing usually the most to be able to send their children to an independent school. I mean, from your travels around, so why do those parents opt for an independent school above and beyond getting an EHCP or going into the state system?
I think it's accepted that state schools are really struggling to provide the specialist additional needs support that a lot of children require. And there are many, many families where the parents never imagined they would be fee-paying parents sending their children to a private school, an independent school, but their child has just not really thrived at the local state school. And again, that's not the fault of the local school, but the parents have found a better fit, as Lavina was describing. They've found the school that they feel is right for whatever reason for their child. It might just be that their child is particularly sensitive and needs extra pastoral care, and that's available at that school. So they're taking their choice there to ensure their child is in the right place. So these are not parents who are super wealthy. These are ordinary sort of dual income household parents, and that is the norm for independent schools across Independent Schools Council across the UK. Typically independent schools are small and parents are paying their fees out of taxed income, and I think it really falls to all of us, and it's we've heard from actual schools today to raise awareness of the realities of the independent sector, because the stereotype that's easily believed by the many, many people who have no experience of independent schooling is really such a tiny proportion of the overall picture. It gives a misleading idea about affordability in the first place. So it's really important for us to help the public to understand what independent schools are really like.
And Lavina, if you wouldn't mind me bringing you in to talk about the SEND perspective from the parental point of view, because I know that you've spoken to a lot of parents who have this exact issue where they don't have an EHCP, but they've chosen the independent sector for the SEND and specialist support they can provide.
Yes, indeed. And I just was wanting to come in there very desperately because EHCP is so hard to get. And when I've listened to stories after stories, because I speak to parents, that's my job in the group, is that one of them who should get EHCP is actually going through a 56 weeks wait. So just making it easy and saying that, okay, those who have EHCP will be exempt is really, really sad. And
just at a time for a couple of, I think, logistical points. There's been a couple of questions in asking about things like fees in advance and implementation timelines. The honest answer to that is that we don't know at this point in time. Fees in advance, we can't know how fees in advance will be affected by VAT until we know some details of the policy. And it's similar for implementation. There's a lot being said in the media, but until we see a plan and know what that looks like, we can't sort of say, can we, Julie, what that means and what that looks like.
Yeah, there's a distinct lack of detail at this point, and it's our hope that in fact there will be a full impact assessment before those details are confirmed, and that will allow us all to be able to put the case clearly.
And we've only got a few seconds left, so I think we've obviously taken you through some of the issues that we can see with VAT today. If you have been impacted by any of the issues, if it is something you are concerned about and you're thinking, what can I do? There are several things I would recommend. Talk to your school about it. They might be able to direct you to things that they are already doing or things that you can help with. Lavina is from Education Not Taxation. You can find them on Facebook. You can also find their website. Get in touch with your local candidates and talk about how this policy will affect you, affect their constituency. And talk to people you know about it. Tell them about your local independent school. Explain why it matters. Talk to your local press. Talk to anyone who will listen, essentially. And if you do need any help, please know if you're in a school, the ISC are here to help you. If you're a parent, ENT are here to help you. And your local independent school is here to help you as well. So please make the most of them. Thank you for joining us this evening. Thank you so much to all of our guests for giving up their time to talk about this policy. And yes, we'll no doubt be talking about this again.
Thank you, Sarah.